Jewish News Syndicate, a news service focusing on Israel and Jewish studies, and a senior contributor for The Federalist, a conservative publication. Jonathan, critics say the IDF underestimates Hamas's ability to stay in existence and that its current prosecution of the war will be a quagmire. So what is the end game, in your opinion?
The end game is exactly what Israel says it's going to be, the destruction of Hamas. The idea that Hamas can resist Israel, for forever, that it can just go on, that's just not true. It has been routed out of northern Gaza. It's been gradually forced back. More and more of its capabilities are being defeated. More and more of the tunnels are being destroyed. It's a slow, laborious process, precisely because Israel is not using its full force. It's trying to go in as surgically as possible to avoid civilian casualties. That's why so many of its own soldiers have been killed by snipers who are in buildings and other places, which might have just been destroyed if Israel was really conducting an indiscriminate campaign. But the idea that Hamas is going to ultimately, wait out Israel, that it's going to be able to survive and ultimately be the victors, because, that the idea that the murderers of October 7th will still be standing at the end of this war, that will be a victory for them. Israel cannot allow that to happen for a number of reasons. Number one, because it's for its own security. Number two, because hundreds of thousands of Israelis have been forced out of their homes in southern Israel, and they can't go back home until it's safe to go back home. And that won't be until Hamas is disarmed, defeated, completely eliminated. And it's only a matter of time until that happens. And Hamas is just prolonging the suffering for its own people by refusing to accept reality.
Israel told Palestinians to leave the northern Gaza Strip at the beginning of all this and head south. Now they're launching strikes in the south. Where else are people who have nothing to do with the war supposed to go?
Well, it's a tragedy for the Palestinians that they're trapped in the war, that their leadership, and after all, Hamas was governing Gaza as an independent Palestinian state in all but name before October 7th for the previous 17 years. But of course, Israel tried to get them out of the places that were most, under fire. At this point, it would be better if they were allowed to leave via Egypt, or to say temporarily out of the line of fire. Egypt won't let them in. No country wants to let them in because the Palestinians have been kept there in Gaza since 1948 as props in order to for the ultimate war against Israel, to destroy Israel. Right now, it's very hard, but that can be ended by Hamas surrendering, giving up the hostages, and stopping this war. They're the ones who can do that. They want to fight to the last Palestinian. That's not something that the world should be applauding or supporting with calls for ceasefires. That was just what Hamas wants.
How worried are American Jews about public sentiment and their place here since the war broke out, with all of the protests on the streets here?
Well, I think American Jews have been shocked, including many who are liberal, not even particularly ardent supporters of Israel, because what we've seen since October 7th is an unleashing of anti-Semitism. Hamas was wrong about its ability to defeat Israel. It was right that it could, instead of starting a blowback against them, in international opinion, the largest mass slaughter since the Holocaust engendered a surge in anti-Semitism, of demonization of Jews, of calls for the destruction of the only Jewish state on the planet and the genocide of its people. And it's shocking that on college campuses and on the streets of American cities, you have people calling for just that and supporting the murders of October 7th. I don't believe the vast majority of Americans agree with them. I know they don't. But it's shocking and it's sad to see that they're tolerated and even mainstreamed, such sentiments in various parts of the corporate media and elsewhere on the left primarily. And that's something that we should take seriously. It's wrong. And what we need is for the leaders of our cultural and leading educational institutions to be condemning this anti-Semitism, not coddling it.
How do you respond to critics who say protesters calling for a ceasefire just want to ensure no more innocent lives are lost, or just support Palestinian statehood and aren't necessarily anti-Israel or anti-Semitic?
Well, that's nonsense. If you're calling for Hamas to survive, you're calling for the survival and the support of an organization dedicated to one thing, the destruction of Israel and the slaughter of its people. They've demonstrated that time and again. If you're for peace and for the Palestinians, you want Hamas to be defeated, eliminated, and to stop its tyrannical rule of Gazans. That's what you should do if you're really for peace. If you're for continuing, it's not supporting Palestinians to encourage them to engage and to continue in a century-old war against Zionism and the existence of Israel that they cannot win, and that will just bring more hardship for themselves, for the Palestinians. That's the tragedy here. People who claim they're for peace are really not. And the thing is, the only kind of hate that seems to be tolerated, the only kind of sentiment that seems to be allowed, is this hatred for Israel. Israel is not a colonizer. It's not a white oppressor. Race has nothing to do with this struggle. The Jews are the indigenous people of that land. The problem here is that a lot of people who claim to be progressives are rooting for a very reactionary and terrorist organization that is dedicated to slaughter and nothing else. And that is neither progressive nor liberal. It's, quite frankly, anti-Semitic. Because if you're willing to deny to Jews rights that you don't deny to anyone else, the right to live in peace and sovereignty in their own country, the right to self-defense, then you're discriminating against Jews. And discrimination against Jews is anti-Semitism.
But there are also Israeli protesters in Israel calling for peace, or the families of hostages calling for the end of fighting right now. Surely they're not anti-Israel.
Well, the families of hostages just want their family members out, and everybody understands that. And, that is part of the problem. Israel wants to get the hostages out, but it can't let Hamas win the war and therefore be in a position to create more October 7th. As far as sentiment within the Israeli people, Israel is a democracy. People believe all sorts of things. But if there's one thing that we know about post-October 7th Israel, it is that support for coexistence with Hamas is down to near zero. The idea that there's a large body of opinion in Israel that wants to stop the war and let Hamas survive, that's a myth. Israelis are divided on lots of issues, not least about Benjamin Netanyahu, their prime minister, but they are united behind this war. Everything I hear from soldiers, from people with families, with soldiers at the front, the soldiers, the morale of the army is very high despite the difficult conditions and despite the casualties, because they know they're defending their homes and their families. Israelis are united behind this war because they know it's an existential conflict. Those who demonstrate in this country claiming, well, you just want the Palestinians to have a chance to live. The only way they'll have a chance to live is that if we allow Israel to eliminate a Nazi-style leadership that is leading them to destruction. Hamas survival means more war and destruction for the Palestinians as well as more terror for Israel.
I'll have to leave it there, but engaging discussion as always. Jonathan Tobin, thank you very much for your time and expertise.
Thank you.